So, good afternoon, everybody. Uh, this presentation is about compound identification and the role that NMR play, or the role that NMR should play in metabolomics and in natural products. Even when the study is was mainly done using mass spectrometry. So, metabolomics, as you all know, offers numerous advantages as an approach for biological studies. Its importance is evident, and I won't list them here. Okay. However, one significant bottleneck persists, which is compound identification, particularly when it comes to natural products. Focusing on NMR studies, compound identification is mainly done using database matching algorithms, such as COMARM. This is great, but mainly for primary metabolites, so biofluids and things like that, or model organisms, for example. Well, anyway, polar compounds. So, in natural products, most of the interest is on secondary metabolites, which are of great importance due to their diverse biological activities and potential applications. However, when it comes to matching algorithm for NMR analysis, especially tailored for secondary metabolites, there is a scarcity of such resources. A significant portion of these compounds remain unknown or uncatalogued in existing database. The initial question that has been on the mind of many researchers for a long time is this one. Is it possible to integrate mass spectrometry to NMR data? We know that structure identification can only be truly achieved by using more than one analytical technique, exploring the concept of orthogonality. So, why should we report annotations in mixtures using only mass spec data, for example? And on the other hand, it's extremely challenging to identify compounds solely based on NMR peaks within mixtures. So, mass spec and NMR are the main techniques for analytical data acquisition. Both have advantages and disadvantages. So we should always strive to explore the advantages of each technique complementarily. Integrating data from both mass spec and NMR can strengthen confidence and accuracy for structure identification, and it allows researchers to cross-validate results, reducing the risk of misinterpretation and providing a more comprehensive understanding of compounds in complex mixtures. And in another uh, level on the biological system studied. So this was the driving force behind this study that we presented on 2019's Faraday discussion, which led us to develop NMR filter. We'll get into that later. But the strategy I always have in my mind goes like this. First, one would use an MS data based the application approach to annotate compounds in a mixture. Those annotations would then serve as candidates for the NMR confirmation done by finding diagnostic peaks or by library matching. So the confirmed structure would then feed back into the mass spec structure elucidation so that the user can continue to propagate the annotation of the database with more confidence. So would this approach would be characterized by the finding of congruent annotations, which is something that is valid. But wait, this is not. This is still not really connecting mass spec to NMR yet. Now let's consider other tools. Some tools in metabolomics. Uh, they can as they can probably help. So in metabolomics rely on statistical methods, and for this to be true, it needs replicates, right? So we can achieve that by using different biological samples, like a collection of extracts, for example, in natural products, or just uh, several individuals. Or we can achieve that by fractionating one raw extract, for example, a Kissy pooled sample, right, into several fractions where compounds will elute in some adjacent samples, creating a concentration variance. I personally call these chromatographic variance. And then this method is is called and then this method called statistical total correlation, or simply STOCSY, might help us to identify NMR peaks that share the same chemical structure. So let me first define what STOCSY is. So STOCSY is a statistical method that enables the identification of correlations between peaks in NMR spectra. That was the original idea, right? It's it uses a multivariate statistical approach to analyze large data sets of spectral data and identify linear relationships between variables, which are in this case data points, or simply put, the peaks. So, correlation calculations are performed to construct a correlation matrix, and by that I mean the correlation of all peaks with each other, right? This matrix then is used to identify pairs of peaks that are strongly correlated. And these peaks, in principle, should share the same chemical structure because their intensity depends on the chemical concentration. Well, if this is true for NMR peaks, where correlations are calculated from their intensities, it should also be true for any other analytical peak that is modulated by compound concentration, right? It's just a matter of how to code everything. So when we add another data set, for instance, mass spec, this method is called statistical heterospectroscopy, or simply SHI. And this is how we are connecting mass spec to NMR. Just to mention, this was done before, but its application is still very limited. And I believe the reason for that is the lack of coding expertise on experimentalists, people like us who are barely on the bench, right? So it was with that in mind that we developed DAFdiscovery as an easy to use Jupyter notebook that allowed users to apply Stocksy in their datasets in a friendly manner. You, I don't have time to prove that here, but Jupyter notebook is a language that opens which opens like a navigator, internet navigator interface, which is really nice. So, and also we took the opportunity to create a method for applying Stocksy to our natural products datasets by including the possibility of merging different data from different techniques into one unified dataset to apply SHI, for example. Uh, Therefore, we offer the opportunity, the options to combine data from mass spectrometry, NMR, and biological activities in or any of these combinations. So this is the scheme of the method, and all data used as input is vendor free since it uses only CSV files. Users can use their preferred method for data processing and then export the CSV files for each data, and DAFdiscovery will only use the CSV files. So now I want to show some examples of that. And here I show the application of Stoxy on a purely NMR dataset of urine from a study collected from Metabolomics Workbench. Not all the data is here, but you can see uh, this is the image resulting from our application of Stoxy using DAFdiscovery. So note that the highlighted peaks show strong positive correlations that define each compound. Uh, these are two examples of Stoxy applied to identify in the uppercase uric acid by selecting this peak in 398 ppm as a driver, and citrate on the bottom that we run by selecting the peak at 3.54 ppm as a driver. Example, uh, more interesting a bit, we connect mass spec features acquired from LCMS to NMR peaks to confirm the identity of mangiferin. In this study, we have 105 fractions of a single raw extract produced from countercurrent chromatography, where every fraction was submitted to both LCMS and NMR as aliquots from the same sample. Note how the diagnostic NMR peaks are highlighted to simplify the analysis and confirm the structure of mangiferin. Uh, the node for mangiferin as annotated from GNPS library matching algorithm according to its fragmentation spectra. And that MS features show a strong correlation with the NMR peaks that characterizes mangiferin. So we have two data sets converging to the same identity. In this other case, we are running 20 samples of essential oils from two species, and we could connect carbon NMR peaks to GCMS features, also to validate compound annotation. Note here that the highlighted GCMS feature in the scatter plot that connects across data sets to the peak at 71.77 ppms. Note how it simplifies the way you analyze your data, right? You would see several MS features and several NMR peaks, but now your NMR spectra is a lot simpler, and your scatter plot for the GCMS is a lot simpler as well. And then moving forward, mm, by using NMR filter, we can now implement the use of 2D NMR experiments to bring even more confidence to the annotation. So for the mass spec, we have fragmentation as an orthogonal thing to add more confidence to the mass spec annotation. For NMR, we can use 2D NMR as an orthogonal other thing to bring more confidence. and NMR filter is here to help with that. With NMR filter, we can access matches within the HSQC spectra and observe the connections of these signals through the HMBC spectra. And by adding HMBC spectra into that plethora of experiments, we can even add quaternary carbons to our annotation procedures. So NMR Filter is a software that we created, and it's under constant optimization to help users to with compound annotation on to the NMR spectra of mixtures. The input to be used are the peak list for each spectra, HSQC and HMBC basically, but if it's available, HSQC Toxi as well, and a list of candidate compounds. With this list of candidates can be acquired from the literature or more preferable from an MS the application routine. Uh, Once this data in there, NMR filter will simulate a chemical sheet for every candidate structure using two methods, and then it will simulate the 2D NMR for matching. It will calculate matching rates for the HSQC, experimental versus simulated, and then use the HMBC and the HSQC tox if available to search connections between the matched peaks from the HSQC. And as an output, it creates a numerical table to list matching rate and clustering information and images for visual validation of the matched peaks. Well, maybe the most important step on is the simulation part. NMR filter uses two methods. One is based on the concept of hierarchical order spherical environments, and another on machine learning. The host method is preferred, especially when there are similar compounds in the database. NMRShift-DB is the database that we use for the simulations, but we are expanding that to add, for example, NPMRD database as an additional source. So just to note, since better simulations will depend on the presence of similar compounds in NMR Shift database, NMR Shift DB, users are more than welcome to submit their similar compounds into NMR Shift DB. It, um, it doesn't even need to be your own data, but also data from the literature. This data will be manually validated by the NMR Shift DB team. So we need you. So this is the numerical table that NMR filter produces as an output, and the parameter distance let us know about how similar the simulated HSQC spectra uh, of the simulated HSQC spectra is from the experimental data. And the parameter standard deviation let us know about how those matched peaks are connected between themselves. The idea is that if they are fully connected, they share coupling constants, and if they share coupling constant, they must share the same chemical structure. A full table for this case, and it can be a lot bigger than that. So here is a real and positive, of course, a positive example of the application of NMR filter for the identification of this flavonoid. Note that by mass spec alone, we could only identify it as deoxyhexoside of tetrahydroxy methoxyflavone. That is as deep as we can go with mass spec. However, with the combination of NMR data, we can confidently determine the complete structure still in the mixture. Still in the mixture, that's important. And then another example is the identification of beta carotene. Note that we could identify 13 of the 14 expected peaks, and all the peaks of the HSQC is linked through the HMBC data. And finally, the identification of iocyanamine from alkaloid-rich extracts from Brugmansia. Note that we could identify 11 of the 11 peaks expected for this structure, and they are all connected through HMBC correlations, and we can still identify quaternary peaks linked to the structure. This is high confidence identification. So, um, using this schema, full orthogonality for compound identification is achieved by combining mass packing in level 1, mass packing level 2, NMR chemical shifts, and NMR coupling constant from 2D NMR. In the future, we are working on developing this new approach for retention time to create a retention time score of plausibility to be able to exclude false positives. So that's the path that we are going through. Just to mention something about the updates on NMR filter. So the idea was born and implemented by 2019. So it's pretty young, and we don't have a grant for that. So it walks it walks slowly. So we present that on Faraday discussion. It's published on the Faraday discussion journal. In that meeting, the focus on that meeting was compound identification within metabolomics. And by 2020, during COVID, during the pandemic, we tested that by comparing that with Colmar, and we didn't lose. The main difference is that we must add a list of candidates, but that list of candidates can be brought from the literature, so it's good enough. So it's under constant updates. Now we are implementing that on Jupyter Notebook, so it's much easier to use instead of using command line, not to scare everybody. So Jupyter Notebook is a good way to do that. And we are adding new database as source of information for the host method for the simulations. We are creating better figures for visual validation. We need to explore better clustering method and seamless combination with NOAA supersequence, mainly considering peak shape and peak picking. That's the path we are going. Shifts. Okay, so I'm fully aware that I might be asking too much from people to acquire HSQC, HMBC, and HSQC toxi of their mixtures. So I must suggest the use of NOAA supersequence with any wet sampling scheme to save machine time. So by combining HMBC, HSQC, and toxi, why these three? Because I want to suggest people to use both NMR filter and Colmar altogether. So by combining these three experiments in one, one can acquire all the 2D data to be used in both Colmar and NMR filter for compound annotation in a fraction of time for collecting all the three experiments in full. We are saving 45% percent of the time comparing to those experiments on a Bruker. On a Bruker, this was this number was reached on a Bruker 600. So the sequence would be this one: GNS NOAA 3 DSPT run with NUS, and I'm using 40% NUS in this case. So this sequence was downloaded from the Genesis website, which is a site website coordinated by Professor Claridge for you to download the sequences and run in your instrument. So I'm suggesting this schema as a main experimental for compound annotation in mixture. I did that suggestion in a review that we recently published this year, and that works beautiful. That works. It looks beautiful. This is the HSQC acquired after. In this case, on the right, acquired after the HMBC spectra was acquired, and on the left is the same HSQC but as a sole experiment. So this is a raw extract of ginkgo biloba, and this is rich enough. This appears everything, right? Okay, yeah, that's it. That's all I want to show, and I need to thank my collaborators, Stefan Kahn, who is in Turku University in Estonia, Dr. Edson at UGA in US, and my colleagues and friends from Brazil. So thank you. And that's it. Thank you very much.